All right, everyone. First, I want to thank you guys all for coming tonight. I know it's pretty busy. We've got a lot of midterms going on. So tonight, this is a Business Education Associates. I've already introduced, but if you guys want to go through your names once again.
I'm Trevor.
Ryan.
And today we're going to play a little game. We're going to play a little bit of Monopoly with you guys today. And kind of starting out with this. Oh my gosh. Is that Janet Yellen? Alright guys, we're playing Monopoly with Janet Yellen today. And let's first start off by talking about the rules. Or kind of a definition that you guys have been getting since Econ 102. So Monopoly is a single seller with a unique product that's non-substitutable, and thus they really have no competition. And these are important because there's a lot of the negative things with this, like really high prices, and also no incentive for innovation. Why would a company innovate if they're the only company in the market? So the monopoly definition has been changed. It's kind of hazy when going from the theory to practice and actually litigating against these large firms. And this has been changed multiple times from the Clayton Act and the Sherman Act. So what we're going to do today is look at a lot of common products you guys may have today, and talk about how they got their fair share and why it's so accessible to us right now. And in addition to that, we're going to uncover maybe some anti-competitive underlying structures. So let's go through that. Let's start. This old man you see right here, his name is Leonardo Del Vecchi, and he's worth $16.6 billion. He's the 37th richest man in the world, and he did so by owning a company called Luxottica. Now, who here has heard of Luxottica? Okay, great. We see a couple here. So basically, Luxottica, if you haven't heard, you soon will recognize. They own all of these luxury brands and more. They make the frames for all these luxury brands, from Gucci, Prada, Chanel. In addition to that, they own most of the outlets that sell sunglasses. So Sunglass Hut, Lens Crafters with the prescription glasses, and Pearle Vision. These are big with things like Ray-Ban and Oakley. So this already kind of signifies that they have a lot of market share, perhaps too much for competitors. And you're probably thinking, well, there has to be cheap sunglasses, like the ones that you get from Walmart or like a grocery store optical type thing. Turns out Leonardo's there too. He owns the actually the Sears Optical and the Target Optical, and a lot of other companies that sell within grocery marts as such. So how did they go about doing this? How are they getting all of this market share that we're seeing today? And this is because of all the buyouts that they're involved in. So they bought Ray-Ban actually a while ago. And Ray-Ban used to be a very cheap sunglass. A lot of people would wear this, and a lot of people, even the poorest people, would have a pair of like Ray-Ban sunglasses in the 50s, 40s. And what they did is they bought this and then subsequently quintupled the price when they did. So that's 20% more than what the production cost of these plastic frames that we are now wearing today. In addition, they did the same thing with Oakley. Oakley didn't like that they were quintupling their price in Sunglass Hut, so Luxottica took them out of Sunglass Hut, their stock prices dropped, and Luxottica had to buy them out. And that sounds very anti-competitive, and that's how they're getting all of these different brands. And the interesting thing that a lawyer and economist said is that a lot of things like laptops or flash drives, for instance, were very expensive 10 years ago. Eyeglasses have been around since, like, we're talking like Benjamin Franklin here, and they cost as much as an iPhone that you can look things up on the internet. So this is something definitely to look into. And in looking into the shares, which is pretty phenomenal, 500 million around the world are wearing Luxottica shades. So for instance, you're wearing glasses. What brand are your sunglasses? Or your prescription glasses?
Yeah, Ray-Ban.
Oh, Luxottica. How about yours? Yeah.
No, they're not. They're Warby Parker. Which is on my
We'll talk about them later. But I bet most of the others are actually Luxottica. So they control 80% of major brands of 28 billion. And this kind of shows kind of the prediction of how sunglasses are going to go to 2020. So you see the red, this is like your prescription glasses. The green is your sunglasses, and this is like contacts down here. So you're like, yeah, a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of you, well, some of you are wearing contacts right now. It turns out they actually also own an insurance company that produces or actually sells those contacts to your optometrist. So they actually do have a big share of that contact market also. So looking at this, you're probably all thinking, okay, we're talking about monopolies, this is definitely a monopoly. These people were actually not regulated, but there is an ongoing investigation. In terms of competitors, we talked about Warby Parker. Warby Parker is more of a sales room. They were actually dedicated to bringing down Luxottica. They're a group of people doing a startup. It's more of a sales room and less of a vertically integrated production company. So they actually don't make them. It's more of selling them and trying to make them cheaper. And the question I want to pose to you guys, I want you guys to keep on thinking when we get to our discussion at the very end, is should a company like this be regulated? Or is it just good business practice? They're just doing vertical integration. They're buying every step, and then they're going out and buying other companies. Is that good business practice, or is that hurting? And yeah.
Okay, not to defend companies that do vertical integration. Because Chevron is actually based out of really close to where I live in California. Chevron used to be part of Standard Oil. Standard Oil is vertically integrated. And vertical integration is a very, very effective way to run a company. And gosh, you can kill competitors left and right if you want once you do that. Once you reach a certain tipping point, you can just wipe out everyone else at level.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of companies that we're going to investigate will see today. We'll talk about that more in the discussion at the end. But that's a good point. So now we talk about something that you guys are, I see a lot of you wearing glasses, I know a lot of you have sunglasses, contacts. Let's talk about something that I know a lot of you guys, including myself, have dealt with. And Ryan's going to tell you a personal anecdote about that.
All right, what's up, guys? Let's talk about cable. So as an industry, there's 90 million subscribers compared to 120 million households. So that's something we've all dealt with for better or worse. You guys, depending where you're from, probably recognize Comcast, Fios, Dish, DirecTV. As you move out west, Time Warner Cable, Cox. But like you said, why is this personal to me, right? So first off, can I get everyone who lives off campus to raise their hands real quick? Okay. Now, leave your hands up if you have Comcast. I saw a couple hands go down. They are the only cable provider in State College. So I guess if you have like Fios, you have like the internet, whatever. But regardless. So my experience with Comcast so far. Move in, he installs it, everything goes pretty well. 2 days later, the whole thing fries. My cable box and router completely fry. And so that means me and my roommates are using data to do schoolwork, go on the internet. It's a personal cost to us, and we weren't happy about that, obviously, needless to say. So they come out 4 days later, a whole 4 days, and like fix it for me and whatnot. So I'm the kind of person who I get it from my dad. I was like, all right, like I'm gonna call, complain, like maybe get a couple free channels or like knock the price a little bit. What did they say? They basically said there's nothing we can do about you. So I looked into other companies, I would find out they're my only choice. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Without accountability, there's no competition, right? So let's talk about competition. If you guys haven't seen an episode of South Park, I recommend it. It gets my thoughts across better than I could. But let's start with satisfaction, right? So I'm just one person. I'm just one person who wasn't satisfied, right? So the ASCI does a weekly benchmark on consumer satisfaction by industry. They survey 80,000 Americans, I believe it was, and then rank each industry by total satisfaction. As you might be able to guess, cable providers ranked 43rd out of 43. And it was a pretty wide margin. In front of them was airlines, and like we all know about airlines, obviously. There's been enough jokes about that. Substitutes. As I said, there are no substitutes in State College. You'd be lucky, depending on where you live. I'm from Westchester, PA. I could pick Fios or Comcast or Dish. But lack of substitutes, again, leads to anti-competition. And then finally, honest margins. As of 2015, the margin for these cable providers overall was 33%, which means that they get to take home 33% of their revenue every single year. That is extremely high compared to most sectors. So let's talk about how they've gotten where they are and how this has been an acceptable practice. Dividing territories, that's the most pertinent point. So as you see on this, it's not extremely clear, but Towards the east, you get lots of Verizon, Comcast, mostly Verizon and Comcast, some Time Warner cable. Through here, Comcast. As I go out west, you get some Cox and Time Warner cable. But by dividing into these territories, while there might not be monopolies on a national scale, they get to monopolize within regions, and we'll get to that later. Price fixing. How does it make sense that a company, depending on your zip code, can charge you more or less for the same service? That just doesn't make sense. It's the same service, but that's because based off the options you have where you are, they can fix the price. Also, how can they maintain such high margins over such a high period of time? And what you can attribute that to is a lack of competition. Because in a perfectly competitive market, which are rare, but in a more competitive market, most of those would be competed away over time due to competition. Finally, monopoly metrics. So I gave you guys a table because I know everyone loves tables. The Herfindahl Index, that's calculated by squaring the market shares of each firm within an industry. And anything above a 2,500 is considered an issue that would be looked into for anti-competitive practices. Comcast, the highest, 647, so it's not even close. And that's because this is done on a national scale. Second, concentration ratio. This is even simpler. It's just based on what the market, you take the top 4 firms and divide their market shares. And it's considered an issue if one is between 80% and 100%. Again, the highest was 31%. And the other concentration ratio, 8, that's the same thing but with 8. And again, not even close. So, conclusion. Using dividing territories to benefit from anti-competitive strategies, these firms can reap all the benefits of having a monopoly, which have directly negative consequences to us without breaking any laws or facing any sort of regulation. So with that, I'm going to give it to Victoria to talk about something a little bit more controversial.
So, in current event news, basically, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have been getting heat for raising drug prices by huge percentages. So, the company I'm going to be looking at particularly in this case is Turing Pharmaceuticals, and they produce a drug that is used to fight parasitic infections. And their CEO acquired the drug and then raised the price by 5,000% overnight. So the media started going after the guy. He basically got shamed into lowering his prices, but it was just too late for him. And he raised the price of one pill from $1,350 to $750. So he made it basically impossible for people to afford medication that they needed to save their lives. Another example of this that's been getting a lot of media attention is EpiPen. So how are they able to do this? Basically, when a pharmaceutical company brings a drug to market, they file for a patent from the U.S. government, and the U.S. government gives them their patent, which lasts for 20 years and effectively makes a monopoly. So no other company is able to make a generic form of that drug. The unique case about Daraprim, which is the anti-parasitic drug that I mentioned before, is that it only gets 8,000 prescriptions a year, so it's not a huge moneymaker for pharmaceutical companies. So their patent ran out 67 years ago, and no other company has made a generic form of this drug simply because it won't make them enough profits. So the reason why this guy bought it was because he realized there was no generic form, and he was just going to jack up the price and get enough profit off of a short term before other companies started making generic forms of the drug. This is a list of popular drugs that just lost their patent in 2014. So there's now generic forms of these drugs coming out. And then interest in drug pricing. So the first image I have is just a Google search trend of the phrase drug price. So right after the scandal with Daraprim, you can see that the search for drug price went up astronomically. There's just a huge spike. And it's continued to get a lot of attention just because of EpiPen and other drugs that are getting added. And then this is also basically tracking the same thing that happened to Daraprim, but for other drugs. So it's a wide variety of drugs actually. Daraprim is really small scale, not many people use it, but doxycycline is an antibiotic that's really popular. And you can see that the jump in prices for that was even larger and affected a lot more people. So how do you justify price changes to the FDA and the US government? Basically, because the FDA has so many restrictions and rules and regulations on bringing a drug to market, it's really costly to do so. So when the FDA comes to a pharma company and says, why are you raising your prices? They just simply say it's because you make me spend so much to create a drug. So this graph shows the preclinical and clinical costs per million, millions of dollars for pharmaceutical companies. And you can see that there's an upward trend, so it's becoming more and more expensive to bring a drug to market, especially in clinical trials. You can see this only goes to 2010, but the upward trend has continued. So how do you solve this problem? Because people need medication, obviously, to survive. There's basically three major proposed ways. There's some fringe ideas that I would say would never happen. But some people think that you should change FDA regulations, so lower the standards of the FDA so it's cheaper to produce drugs and companies aren't spending billions of dollars to bring drugs to market. Revise patent laws, so don't give a patent to a company for 20 years and make a monopoly on the drug that's needed. And then increase regulation on orphan drugs. Orphan drugs are drugs that are needed to survive. So AIDS medication, cancer medication, Daraprim falls under that category as well. Basically saying that for drugs that you need to survive, you can't price them at astronomical rates. So that was a look at what is negative about monopolies. This is a slightly more positive look at what monopolies do to society.
So a common theme that we've sort of been touching on throughout this presentation today has been that industry-specific characteristics can really play a role in how we look at monopolies and how we determine whether a monopoly exists in the industry. And given the increasing size and consolidation of corporations today, this might not be the best way of looking at how whether a monopoly exists in a specific industry. I'll be taking a look at Apple and showing that even though they have significant competition in all their product markets, that they're able to engage in certain monopoly-like practices that, well, there's a positive side to that, and then there's also a negative side that we'll be looking at. So in 2015, Apple had a market cap of just over $700 billion, which, if they were a country, they would be ranked 20th in terms of GDP, which is pretty large. So how is Apple able to maintain that, and what does that enormous market cap allow them to do? They sort of have this creative business strategy of creating synergies between their products. So it's not really like they're just competing in one product industry, but all their products work together. Sort of adds an interesting dynamic to how we look at their competition in these industries. We sort of call this product synergy, or the lock-in effect, wherein they're able to lock in consumers because the consumers become heavily invested in their products, which effectively lowers the elasticity of demand for those products and allows them a little bit more leverage in how they deal with their customers. So recently they've been getting a lot of flack for their decision to remove the headphone jack. I mean, this is a controversial decision. You know, you get in your friend's 2005 Honda Civic that doesn't have an aux cord, or doesn't have Bluetooth. You're not able to blast your jams. So what do you guys think Apple's strategy is by making this move? What are some of the positives and negatives that could come out of this? Yeah,
They could
Chris?
sell a lot of wireless headphones since they just bought Beats a couple years ago.
Good. What might be a positive outcome? Yeah. Why might that be positive?
I'm just saying, like, we used to have these old plugins to iPhone 4s, and now no one has those anymore. It could just be another integration.
Right.
Yeah, we just don't.
Playing off that drives more innovation for Bluetooth technology.
So we sort of saw similar things in the past, but with removing the optical drive on the MacBook Pro, or the MacBook Air rather, which sort of garnered a lot of backlash from consumers, but now it's basically accepted by everyone. So, I mean, it's interesting to see how this will play out and whether this is really something that will harm consumers or benefit society in the end. So we sort of see this battle between synergy and product control. So obviously there are efficiencies that come with these huge corporations that we see nowadays, but there are also these potential downsides wherein you're sort of locked into this product and you don't have as much option to switch out when you want to. So we're going to break up into smaller groups, I think, in a few minutes here to talk about some of the themes we've covered and just some questions to go into that with in mind. How do market characteristics alter how we assess competition, and does corporate structure inevitably lead to anti-competitive practices? And referring to some of the previous topics we've touched on for companies like Luxottica, Comcast, Medicine, how should we redefine monopoly? And is our economy in a state where we need to promote competition?